Hi everyone, welcome to What's Happening in Brazil. Let's start with the latest news from the country.
September 7th is the day that marks the independence of Brazil, when the country stopped being a Portuguese colony in 1822. It is also the day on which popular movements go to the streets organized in a mobilization known as the Cry of the Excluded. The mobilization is a counterpoint to the Cry of Independence and reminds us of the importance of people's rights, especially the most vulnerable in society, such as the working class, women, the black community, indigenous people, peasants, among others. This year, the mobilization was part of the protests calling for Bolsonaro resignation, with the motto, "Life in the first place," in the struggle for popular participation, health, food, housing, work, and income now. Respecting the sanitary measures, demonstrations in more than 200 cities across the country shouted out Bolsonaro and denounced his mismanagement of the pandemic, which records nearly 600,000 deaths in the country. Amid the serious social and economic crisis that the country is facing and the drop in popularity, President Jair Bolsonaro also called his supporters to go to the streets on September 7th. In a speech in São Paulo and Brasília, Bolsonaro threatened again with a coup against democratic institutions in the country, such as the judicial and legislative powers, both responsible to guarantee the compliance of Brazil's constitution. Pro-government demonstrations demanded the closing of the Supreme Federal Court and the military intervention on democracy, which would be under the command of Bolsonaro. But even with external financing from Brazilian agribusiness, the public was just 5% of the expected, and pro-government mobilizations concentrated in the cities of Brasília and São Paulo. In other parts of the country, there was little mobilization in favor of the government. In the view of political analysts, the events consolidated Bolsonaro's isolation.
The Supreme Federal Court is going to rule a decisive lawsuit for indigenous people in Brazil. The thesis, backed by ruralists, considered a disrespect to the country's traditional peoples, suppressing from many communities the right to the land.
To defend the life and legacy of the native peoples, more than 6,000 indigenous people have occupied Brasília, Brazil's capital city, since August 15th this year.
We are fighting against any suppression of the rights of indigenous peoples, rights that we conquered historically.
Our story does not start now. Our story has more than 521 years.
This is the largest mobilization in the history of the indigenous movement in Brazil. They have representatives of 173 ethnic groups protesting against the Jair Bolsonaro government and the anti-indigenous agenda underway in the legislative. The attention turned to the ruling of the so-called timeframe limitation thesis, which is on the agenda of the Supreme Court and will define the future of the indigenous lands demarcation in the country. Thousands of indigenous people camped in the Three Powers Square. Using the power of songs, prayers, and candles, they make daily vigils in front of the Supreme Court.
Demarcação! Já! Demarcação! Já! Demarcação! Já! Povo unido!
In practice, the time frame limitation thesis is used by agribusinesses representatives to review the demarcation of the indigenous lands and make it impossible. According to the measure created in the government of Michel Temer, the demarcation of land can only happen if indigenous peoples prove that they occupy the area before or in the exact day of the Constitution's enactment on October 5, 1988. The process, that is being considered once more by the ministers, concerns the possession of the territory of the Xoklang people from Santa Catarina state. It will serve as a basis to judge all similar cases. In all, 310 indigenous lands demarcation processes are stopped, according to the Indigenous Missionary Council.
This bill will destroy our territories, our rivers. It will end our mother nature, the Amazon rainforest, and your lives, the lives of non-indigenous people.
The campaign Fighting for Life and the intense schedule of activities in Brasília are organized by the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil with grassroots indigenous organizations.
people with mental disorders have always been destigmatized by society, but projects such as the Cândido Ferreira Health Service in Campinas, a city in the São Paulo state, are changing this scenario. Artistic expression can and should be an ally in psychological treatment.
Psychophobia, a new word to an old problem, the prejudice against people who suffer from mental disorders.
The idea of writing the song Psychophobia came from an observation. I made of the mistreatment toward people suffering from psychological distress, mental disorders, or mental disabilities.
Psicofobia é balde de água fria que não entende meu falar. Profetizando falsas alegrias, não compreende a agonia e o peso de calar.
O que acontece muito.
What happens a lot is that even people from the family circle usually mischaracterize the person, some of the person's attitude or opinions, therefore devaluing what the person brings up or feels because of the mental disorder.
Mariane is the technical director of the health service Cândido Ferreira in Campinas. It is a network that offers cultural treatment and workshops for patients with mental health disorders. Silvana Borges is one of the people supported by the initiative. She's an announcer, or rather, mad announcer of Maluco Beleza Radio, a project maintained by the health service.
Olá, pessoal, aqui com vocês, sou a locutora oficial Silvana Borges.
Silvana was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the end of the 80s. She was admitted to an asylum and put in a straitjacket.
É muito importante a nossa voz.
For 19 years, our voice on Maluco Beleza Radio has been very important. I am one of the voices, the first female voice. We are the voice and the right of speech of many people who were silenced during their entire period of hospitalization. Many died while hospitalized.
The art has a much greater reach. It's important to introduce the general population to the artistic production of these patients to demystify the idea that people with mental issues are unproductive or non-creative patients.
What about learning a new recipe? It's time for Brazilianism.
This recipe is a Portuguese-style variation of a homemade recipe that has numerous versions around the world. Actually, they all start from a very simple and tasty idea: cooking eggs in tomato sauce. In Mexico, they call them huevos rancheros. In the Middle East, shakshuka. In Italy, eggs in purgatory. Because of the sardines, I call this recipe the Portuguese skillet. Braise the onion in olive oil with a pinch of salt and a little bit of fat you will remove from the canned sardines. Add the cloves of garlic and braise it too. Add the diced tomatoes and stir well. Add half a cup of water. Cover the pan so that it cooks and begins to melt. I forgot about the parsley stalks, but that's okay. I committed a mistake, but I can fix it. Just add it later, and the flavor will still be there. Add salt to taste. Place the sardine fillets, forming a flour. Between each sardine, crack an egg. Sprinkle the eggs with salt and black pepper. Turn down the heat and cover the pan. Let it cook for as long as you want. 5 minutes for soft eggs. Add the parsley leaves and the red chili pepper. Turn off the heat, cover the pan, and set aside for 2 minutes before serving. You can eat it with rice and beans or just with bread, as I do. In this last case, this recipe is a delicious snack to receive friends.
Did you like the show? So hit the like button and share with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive notifications. We'll see you next week.